when you're in pain, soothing as a springtime rain, to have a friend right in your corner, your heart will feel a little warmer. Tender loving care, tender loving care, each warm and friendly touch lets someone know you care so much. Tender loving care, tender loving care.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Greenbrier Almond, and thank you for joining us on our program, Tender Loving Care. Each week on Channel 3, we talk about this interface between Christianity and medicine, and we've never run out of topics. And unfortunately, this flood in West Virginia that we've had just in the last several weeks provides new ways to talk about tender loving care. Indeed, we're going to recover from the flood. West Virginians stick together, but it'll be a tender loving care project for all of us. And I have a headline: when will West Virginia recover from the flooding? This is from the recent Record Delta, and it's an article written by Don Smith, West Virginia Press Executive Director. And I want to quote him and then talk a little bit about stages of the life and stages of development and how people will handle a trauma like a flood. Don Smith writes that we will know when our recovery period is ended when the elderly ladies are not crying. And one of the tapes, and I've listened to many of these on TV and then on the computer, on the smartphone, was about an elderly couple. Their neighbors had died, and one house had been knocked off of its foundation down in White Sulphur Springs, and they themselves have lost everything, including hope, of course, their home and all their possessions. So they were crying, and that's, of course, expected. So one of the ways to look at this is when people can tolerate what has happened to them, work it through a little bit, have some more hope, and can carry on. In the meantime, of course, the rest of us, we were spared. Our section of West Virginia has not had that type of devastation this time, and we were spared. And so we as neighbors, helping neighbors, it's on our shoulders to help out. And we can send money, we can send Clorox, we can send lime, and I've been working with the local fire department, the local churches, and each of us have a charity or a resource. And I would say right now, having been a disaster psychiatrist, particularly the years I was at the VA, the 17 years there, we were trained to go out and help in disasters. Don't go into areas unless you are Red Cross certified, unless you are, they're the ones who manage the crisis, and they let people in, they help people get back out. Someone has to be the traffic cop and make sure things are handled well. Don't just go in and try to do good without some supervision, without checking in with those in authority. But there'll be work to do for all of us to do over a period of time, and recovery will take a while. And some people will be crying 2 years from now. They will not be able to get past what has happened to them. And so that brings me to an opportunity to talk a little bit about tender loving care from the medical perspective, from the medical model. And I'm going to reference a talk that I gave to the nursing educators. They have a nurse practitioner, pediatric focus, and mental health focus program at West Virginia Wesleyan College, a master's degree program. And I spoke to them last 17th of March of this year, 2016. And I want to just lift up some of the ideas that we talked about and then put them into this twist of this flood that we've experienced. I reminded the students that John Wesley, and we have Wesleyan College in our community, was well known for his medical text called Primitive Physic. And it went into 23 different editions in his lifetime. This is more copies, more editions than anything else that he wrote. And even though this was in the 1700s, this was still a medical text of practical information for people to have in their home and make reference to even until 1880. So the information was very basic and very focused on how to survive things that happened to us, particularly in Appalachia. He had in mind the poor people that he was writing this for. He was helping coal miners in Wales. He was helping factory workers in Birmingham. He had visited Savannah and Georgia, and of course the early Methodists were circuit riders through Appalachia. So this physical primitive physic was written for us, and with us in mind. I want to emphasize a couple of things. This was a long talk, and I don't want to go over every point about it, but I want to talk about the stages of development. I thought that would be particularly relevant. There's a Harvard psychiatrist who outlined what is commonly accepted, and in my 42 years of practice has been a guide, is the psychosocial stages of development. This was Erik Erikson, and I think it was probably 1963, and just in time for me as I was going into medical school in 1970, for this to be a guide for us to use. And so what I'm going to go through each of the stages today, just as a reminder that we handle trauma, we handle stress, we handle the issues of recovery according to our age appropriateness. In the first year of life, and we lost at least 4 children died in the flooding, and I know that not all bodies have been recovered, not everyone has been accounted for, and I hope there's not more children who die, but anyway, the children have been impacted by this. Of course, their homes have been taken away, their dogs or cats have been lost and disappeared in the flood, and so children are involved. In the first year of life, from 0 to 1, the main issue of a child is trust, developing trust. When the baby cries, it's a trust issue. The baby will expect to be fed or changed. Pretty primitive, but we want to be held, but they'll send a signal that they have a need, and they expect an adult. The mother primarily is very important in the first year of life. If the mother has been ill, if the mother is not present, then this is really hard for the child. Children who are in a situation without a mothering person have failure to thrive. That's what a pediatrician calls failure to thrive. They're not eating well. They're not sleeping well. They're lethargic. They're just not growing. And children left alone. This has happened in nurseries, overseas, orphanages, and so forth like that, where there's just no care providers, but someone's trying to do the best they can. Some children will just die in the crib. They don't have the ability to trust, and they don't know what to do. So, of course, the areas of mistrust, the opposite of that, of trust would be, that's what will develop if they get through that stage of life. And that can lead to some of the more severe mental diseases that we have. Schizophrenia, where people are not in touch with reality, or paranoia, where people have a severe distrust for anyone. So those are the bad things that can happen. In the earlier phases, Freud talked about the oral phase of life. That's where everything is dependent on food and milk and the mother's nurture, and so that's another way to describe those tasks of growing up. A second stage of life would be from age 2 to 3. This is when a child is developing autonomy or shame or doubt if they're not successful. Autonomy is seeing yourself as an individual. I've watched our granddaughters grow up, and now we have a senior older child and then a younger child, both of them girls, in both my son's family and my daughter's family. And so I watched the younger children develop their sense of autonomy. Initially, they pay attention to everything that the older sister does. And of course, they pay attention to their mother. And a child may not see themselves as separate. In fact, it's interesting, Camille, who was just born in March and has an older sister, 4 years old now, will let herself be held very carefully, with the older sister invading her space, getting right down in her face, cuddling her, of course she's helpless, almost helpless as a baby, but she could protest, but she very much seeks that older sister's presence. But I think that she sees herself as one with her sister. She doesn't see herself as a separate entity. And likewise, there's a cat in their family, and the cat can lay down and nap with the little baby, and it looks like they're bonded together. But there's a between 2 and 3 there's a sense of autonomy, a differentiation that develops where there's independence, and children start to do things for themselves. One of those things is toilet training, and that's been out there for a long time. People who have been in the floods, have visited the sites of the flood, of course will describe the lack of cleanliness, the sore smell, the smell of death of animals that have died, the mud every place, and it takes people back, and it can lead to a sense of shame or doubt about what is right, what is wrong, what's happening. And that's something that could happen, could carry through these children, and where if it's an adult and they go through a flood like this or a tragedy, they may go back to an earlier stage when they were traumatized and regress and be back, may give up washing, may give up being neat and tidy and so forth. All those things can happen as a regression. Erickson outlined also then a third stage, and these are just, as you can see, age-based. And as a doctor, as a psychiatrist, when I would be examining a child or a person in my office, maybe a whole family, maybe if the whole family's gone through the flood, then everyone's sitting together and we're talking about what has happened and how we're going to recover and what we can do, and people, and find out what resources they have. I mean, strengths of character, church affiliation, families away from the flood site where they can go and visit or live and rebuild their lives. All these things, as you take inventory, you pay attention to how they're going to handle the trauma or the crisis based on their age. So this staging is very important. Next stage 3, so to speak, is age 4 to 6. And this is a stage of initiative or versus guilt. And a child is becoming independent, and in fact a child at age 4 to 5 learns more in 1 year than a college student learns in 4 years of college. You can see the fluency in language, numbers, alphabet, reading, music, all these things are very, very rapid growth. We had in 1980, we sponsored in Buchanan, and it's a wonderful experience, a Cambodian family. I was in charge of a committee called New Start, New Life, and a whole bunch of people, a lot of people in our town working together, helped the Uk Tim family come from Cambodia to Buchanan, West Virginia. And we were to take care of them. This was our charge from the United Nations, and the Lutherans, who had a refugee camp on the Thai border in Thailand, just at the nation next to Cambodia. and we were selected to have this family come and start here in America and adapt to the American lifestyle. We were to nurture them along, take good care of them as they went through this whole process of changing cultures, getting jobs, learning the language, going to school, everything that would have to happen so they could adapt, so they could be independent people. We did not want to create people who were dependent on the government of the United States for welfare or anything like that. We wanted independent people. And Buchanan, to our credit, did a wonderful job working together with the Ucht'en family. But there was a little boy, and he was about 4 years old, and he was learning Khmer, which he would learn over in his country and in Thailand. And he was in a refugee camp, and he heard his parents speaking Khmer and his older sister. So he was learning Khmer, but then he started hearing English, and Appalachian English to boot, you know. But he was here in America, and he just stopped speaking. He didn't say anything because he probably didn't know what to say. He didn't want to say the wrong thing. I mean, he was independent enough. He had that initiative, that sense of initiative, but you could just see him freezing up. And then after a while, he started speaking English. He caught on, and he's done very well. He's a college graduate now, married successfully, and a wonderful person. So, but at that stage in his life, it was an issue of initiative or guilt. And maybe he felt guilty that he didn't know what to do, but of course it was not his fault. He was changing cultures. He was getting a lot of love, a lot of support. And one of the things that happens is that if your child needs help, is a pet. And a tragedy of the flood has been that that pets have been killed too. Favorite dogs, favorite cats, even farm animals that a child relates to. These have been lost also in the flood. So there's this stage of initiative versus guilt is a big deal. The guilt comes out because children expect to be in charge or do things for themselves, and if something goes wrong, they might even blame themselves. They might feel that the flood took place because they were bad, or they didn't clean their room, or they didn't eat their spinach, or that type of thing. They feel like they have a almost supernatural way, and they're responsible for the bad things that have happened to their family and them. Well, that's the stage 3 according to Erickson, but there's more. There's a lot more. In childhood, there's stage 4, and this is age 7 through 12 chronologically. This is a stage of industry versus inferiority. West Virginians already have a problem with this. Dr. Dean, Dean of our medical school in the past, Dr. Duvall, came from Texas, and he pointed out correctly, I believe, that the Texans have a sense of grandiosity, that they just think Texas is the best thing in the world, and Texans are great, and it's an expansive area, and they're very proud of all their oil wealth and that type of thing. But West Virginians have a sense of inferiority. We feel like we do get the losing end of the stick, that there are floods, there are bad things that happen to us. There's a recession going on in West Virginia with the collapse of the coal industry, and all sorts of things happen. And even though it's boom to bust, a few years ago we were on top with low unemployment and so forth, we still have overall this sense of inferiority, and it may come back to this stage, this age 7 through 12, because we haven't, in a sense, mastered what we call competency skills. Now this happens in school primarily. Kids start to be measured in kindergarten and first grade and up through the grade school elementary age, and we know that if a child is not learning those skills well, especially by 3rd grade, then they are feeling inferior, and sometimes that is a lifelong feeling. That's why we want to make a diagnosis of ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or we want to find out how to help a child succeed, particularly in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, so that they will go on and have a successful life. Doesn't mean that they won't succeed. Nothing's hopeless, but it takes a lot more effort later on if something's discovered after, as the saying is in West Virginia, the horse is already out of the barn. And if they already feel inferior, then we have a problem that's harder to get over. But this sense of self-confidence comes from learning new things. And we need to be encouraged and praised, and children will respond to that. They respond to stars and stickers. And I was talking to a lady the other day at the Festival Friday when we were having our wonderful birthday celebration that begins for the 200th year of Buchanan. We're having our 4th of July Independence Day celebration beginning on the first day of July on that Friday night. I was talking to a young lady, and she was remembering my father and his office, and she remembered a purple sucker that she got for being a good girl, for coming in and being a cooperative patient. And how about that? That's after all those years, she remembers that lollipop that she received. So children can feel successful and praised in various ways. And Dad used to have some lollipops up on top of his refrigerator, and we would even stop as his children if we were going to town for some other reason, not a doctor's visit, but just to get our lollipop because we knew they would be there. But this sense of industry is developing from age 7 to 12, and if it doesn't develop, there's a sense of inferiority. I want to go on to the other stages here, because in this limited program, I'm not attempting to say everything that a college master's degree program would learn about psychiatric evaluation and interview and care, but just to hit some highlights here of Erik Erikson's stages of life. Well, stage 5 is from 13 to 19, the adolescent years, and a child is learning identity. And if they don't learn it successfully, there's a role confusion. Now, it's interesting, we don't have uniforms in America. In the Philippines, the schools have uniforms. Children wear uniforms. And it has some merit because rich or poor, everyone has the same uniform. But children have uniforms. If you would go to the middle school here in Buchanan Upshur Middle School or Buchanan Upshur High School, you would notice right away that all the children are dressed about the same. Now, it might be blue jeans, it might be a certain kind of t-shirt, it might be a certain kind of hairstyle, but they all are trying to have a common identity, a common role that they want to be in, they want to be accepted, and if they're not, there's role confusion. So the teenage years are like that. They like the same music, and it's very interesting. I was listening to a TV program as we've had our flood, and there've been horrendous pictures of the flood scenes and so forth. But one man is being interviewed, and he was commenting on his own youth and maybe another flood, and when he was younger, and he was remembering a song that was popular at that time, and he said, if I hear that song even today, I start to cry. It was so ingrained in him and so important to him. And there'll be things that happen. There are ballads that are being created today. I haven't heard any of them that stick in my mind or sound like they'll be lasting. But certainly, Country Roads, Take Me Home. When it's played, and when it's played to a backdrop of the flood and the difficulties we're having now, it further is etched into my mind and into my psyche as who we are. And I don't even think John Denver realized what an identity he was creating when he created that song. Now, we do have identity confusion. Let's say it that way. We have at least 4 state songs. Not every small state has 4 state songs, but we do. When I was growing up, West Virginia Boys and Girls was part of that song, and the West Virginia Hills. But there's 4 of those out there. And West Virginia Wesleyan has My Home Among the Hills, which is a wonderful song. But this question of identity and role confusion is what takes place in age 13 through 19. Now, you get into the adult stages, age 20 through 34, we as a culture already have a problem. Perhaps over half of the marriages ending in divorce, and many people living together, not even committing to marriage, and then connecting together and then drifting apart. maybe children with different parents. It's quite confusing as a doctor expecting all the children to have the same father and mother, trying to understand genetics when we see this happening. But this is a sign of in 20 through 34 that we're not even doing the intimacy part very well in our society. But bring a flood on, bring a disaster on, and people will end up even more isolated and in trouble. From the 9/11 time, remember that, and when the World Trade Center was bombed by airplanes, and over 3,000 people died in one day, attack on America. I had a lady living in isolation in a small trailer up in the country with her children, and all summer those kids were not allowed to go out and play because she was afraid that somehow Arabs would come and take her children away, kidnap them, even though that would be remote. She was already isolated in a very remote part of West Virginia, and not really probably subject to kidnapping, but that was her fear. That was how severe the isolation can get. Another stage of life is 36 through 65, and I'll touch on that briefly, that we're supposed to get into generativity, and people end up with stagnation. West Virginia already has an issue here. 53% of our workforce are not working, 53%. It's not like 6% not working, it's like 53%. And there are various reasons for that. Been a lot of layoffs now in the coal fields, and then that trickles down to other jobs, of course. But it also indicates that generativity is an issue. I suspect with the flooding, many people will have to move. They'll have to give up their property, they'll have to move. Senator Manchin said as much, that he said people are not going to be able to rebuild where they have been flooded out this time. And whole towns have been wiped out. So we have a lot of recovery to do, and that would be the point of my program. Finally, I'll talk about the last stage of life briefly, integrity versus despair. This is for the 65 plus people. This is for people like myself at 68. We will know we're out of recovery or through recovery when the elderly stop crying. And it's going to be a while, because a lot of people have lost everything and they don't have the resiliency to build it back. The children, the grandchildren are going to have to help. We're all going to have to help. But our hands are full. But I hope that just talking like this about Erik Erikson's stages will let you know how a doctor would approach this, how a nurse is going to approach this, and then, of course, how we all can aid each other in recovery. Well, until the next time, this is Dr. Greenbrier Allman thanking you for joining us on our program, Tender Loving Care. Special thanks to Channel 3 for this opportunity to come your way each week. We'll see you down the road as we talk more about Tender Loving Care.
Stories of a West Virginia Doctor, written by Dr. Harold D. Allman. A collection of 55 short stories about his experience as a small-town doctor in central West Virginia. And Tender Loving Care, Stories from a West Virginia Doctor, Volume 2, written by Dr. Greenbrier Allman, using videotapes to write 70 additional stories of his father's very colorful life as a small-town doctor. They can be found for purchase at Amazon.com and most local bookstores. Tune into Channel 3 Buckhannon for Tender Loving Care with Dr. Greenbrier Allman, where he talks about the connection between Christianity and medicine.